Israelis and Palestinians have been locked in conflict for more than 50 years. Too many people have died. Too many lives have been shattered. Can the future be different from the past? Is peace possible? Can two peoples who have fought each other for so long live next to each other without violence? This film explores how the core issues might be resolved. Jerusalem, security, Palestinian refugees, settlements and borders. The shape of the future. This is Kalandia, an Israeli checkpoint located within the city limits of Jerusalem. Thousands of Palestinians who are Jerusalem residents must pass through Kalandia every day to go to work, to reach school, and to receive medical care. To Palestinian Jerusalemites, like the Abu Rumeli family, getting past the Israeli soldiers at Kalandia can literally make the difference between life and death.
Sometimes the soldiers behave in a very rude and inhumane way. So I took the risk and called Israeli headquarters at Bethel. I told them that I was on my way to the checkpoint because I had a medical emergency and I needed to get my son to the hospital.
As for Mohammed's health condition, it is not good at all because his kidney is misplaced downwards. That night he was suffering from a severe case of vomiting and diarrhea. First, I tried to treat him with home remedies like herbs and pain medication. However, when the situation worsened to the point where he could not hold anything in for more than a minute, I tried to let him rest. Then it became an emergency.
When I arrived at the checkpoint, I saw many people waiting, some of them sleeping. Fortunately, there were people around. I went to the soldier and explained my situation. He tried to detain me by making smart comments. Then they searched my car very thoroughly. So they delayed me, but I had to get through.
This time, Mohammed reached the hospital. However, his kidney condition is chronic. The delay they suffered that night is likely to happen again as long as the checkpoints exist. And there are hundreds of Israeli checkpoints and roadblocks inside Jerusalem and around the West Bank and Gaza.
A young soldier decides the fate of people day by day, whether to let them pass in or out or to go to work. The checkpoint in the eye of the Palestinian is not a checkpoint. It's the gate of the prison we are in.
Most Israelis take a very different view of checkpoints. They see them as necessary to prevent terrorism.
From what I know, the checkpoints inside and outside the city are mainly for the purpose of conducting security checks.
Uri Ahmedi is an Israeli. He lives in West Jerusalem with his wife Ricky and their children. Uri's family originally came from Iraqi Kurdistan.
My parents immigrated to this country out of their yearning for Zion. They always prayed for Zion and Jerusalem. They did not escape from Iraq. They fulfilled every Jew's dream to ascend to Zion because that was their aspiration.
Uri works in the center of Jerusalem, where many bombings have taken place.
Since the increase of attacks in the city, there are checkpoints almost everywhere. I see them in the market and in the city center. And I know that there are many on the roads around Jerusalem.
Uri believes that Israelis owe a debt to the soldiers and police who provide security.
Yes, this city that is like a military operation, it has to be protected from every direction. It's true that when you stand at a checkpoint for many years and you carry a weapon, hearing every day about another explosion, some of your senses get dull. It's certainly not typical of everybody.
While Palestinians complain bitterly about the oppression they experience from occupation and checkpoints, Israelis focus on the horrible pain they feel as a result of suicide bombings.
The moment we hear the ambulances in the street, we immediately get very tense. We want to know where it happened. We immediately inventory all our friends, the whole family, everybody we know. We receive many phone calls. They want to know where Uri is. They know that he's always in the city centre or near the market. Is everybody okay? Everybody calls everybody. It has turned into a kind of a habit.
Yet, Ricky and Uri, like most Israelis, are coping.
When I ride the bus, I don't think that the bus is about to explode. No. But I look around me to see that there is nothing suspicious. Buses do explode, but that does not prevent us from taking the bus. Life's routine continues the same. Whether there is an attack or not, we live here. We don't lock ourselves in the house. My children will live here. They will not go somewhere else to live. This is our home.
Every attack is very hard, and sometimes it seems that if the municipality comes with its water hoses, it will succeed in washing off everything, as if nothing happened. But you can't wash away the pain.
Whoever was born in Israel, whoever served in the army or its security forces, knows that this state, since 1948 and before, has suffered from ongoing war, bloodshed, and terrorist attacks.
Yaakov Perry was director of Israel's internal security agency, the Shin Bet. Zuhair Manazra was also head of an intelligence agency, Palestinian Preventive Security, on the West Bank.
The basic problem in this struggle is, from the beginning, the two sides tried to destroy the other. There's no trust. There is the continuing bloody struggle that prevents logical debate.
Nobody wants it, but we Israelis understand that this is how we have to live. In order for us to achieve true personal security, the first condition is that the Palestinian Authority today, or the Palestinian state tomorrow, will have to fight terror.
Well, personally, I would not arrest a Palestinian to protect the Israeli occupation. However, I would arrest a Palestinian carrying a weapon in violation of Palestinian law. If Israel ends its occupation of Palestinian land, and if this is guaranteed, I believe that the Palestinian people and the Palestinian Authority will be very able to deal with Palestinian extremism.
I think that for the Palestinians to say that until the occupation ends they will not fight terror is a statement which should be condemned.
I can say that Palestinians have little faith in the possibility that there will be a fair solution with the Israeli state.
On our side, I have no doubt that we could also contribute to the process by evacuating Gaza, by removing illegal settlements, and by our army leaving places that we can afford to leave.
Palestinian extremism feeds on Israeli government attacks, and Israeli extremism feeds on violent Palestinian actions.
There is no doubt that there is a chicken and egg syndrome. There is also a vicious cycle. When they do a terror attack, we do a retaliation action. And in response to the retaliation action, they again do a terror attack.
There should be a clear political statement from the Israeli government expressing its intention of ending the occupation of Palestinian lands and assisting the Palestinians in establishing an independent state, so that there will be security for Israeli society. The Israeli need for peace should be combined with a declared Arab and Palestinian recognition of Israel and its right to exist in defined and safe borders.
There has to be a beginning of some peace process, some kind of serious negotiation where both sides see a chance for an end to the conflict.
The real solution lies in reaching an awareness in which the two sides become partners in mutual security. Then the two parties will become partners in reaching security for each other. Israel tried all the other ways. It tried full control, banishing and oppression. It tried to find Palestinian agents who would support it from inside Palestinian society. All this did not work. It didn't bring peace to Israel. I believe it is time for Israel to understand that establishment of a Palestinian state is the only way to end the security danger.
Even the most extreme Israeli leaders understand that establishment of an independent Palestinian state is the only solution. There is no other solution. People on both sides are tired of living the way they are living, without personal security, under terror attacks.
Security is the opposite of fear. If fear were to go away, then I would be living in security.
It is security when you put your head on the pillow, knowing that there is nobody out there who can scare you. There are no soldiers who might come and arrest you in the middle of the night.
For Israelis, what is bothersome regarding personal security is the fact that a child, a mature person, a woman or a soldier leaves his home in the morning and doesn't return because he travelled by bus, because he went to a discotheque, because he was hurt in a terror attack, which doesn't distinguish between soldier and civilian. That, of course, creates a very acute sense of fear. Fear of the unknown.
I'm very worried. I'm worried for us. I'm worried for my children. My son when he goes to school. I hope he will come back home. I hope that I will come home from work. Nothing is certain.
Well, normal life for a Palestinian should be like normal life for any person. Like a Frenchman, a Norwegian, a German, or an Israeli. A Palestinian wants to wake up, drink his coffee, look at his calendar and see whether the weather will be nice or not. He goes to work, listens to music, goes for a walk, does sports, or maybe reads a book or poetry.
A normal life in this country, here in Jerusalem, is the kind of life where you do not have to be afraid. A normal life, in my opinion, is when every woman, her husband and children are able to live in a home where they do not need to lock the doors, where you do not fear there are military raids outside.
A life where all my thoughts are of how I can serve myself and help the community around me. A normal life is a life that has joy, where a child has his rights, where a man has his rights.
A normal life for me is the kind of life where I do not have to look for a radio every hour to hear what happens. A normal life for me is one where I have some inner quiet, knowing when I leave in the morning that I will come home safely.
From 1948 to 1967, Jerusalem was a divided city with a separation wall running through the middle. East Jerusalem, where Samir lives, belonged to Jordan. In 1967, Israel swept to victory in the Six-Day War and annexed the eastern part of the city, while also seizing the West Bank and Gaza. Israel declared Jerusalem to be its undivided capital. Today, in fact, the city is increasingly divided by insecurity, by fear, and by physical barriers. But within those barriers, there are Jerusalemites like Uri and Samir who are committed to creating a better life for their people. Uri is director of the community center that works to improve Jerusalem's central market.
It's not just the place I work. I see it as a mission. In Jerusalem city center, I believe that I am a partner in building the inner strength of Israeli society.
Samir makes his living delivering meat. Every day but Friday, he drives his truck to the restaurants and shops near the old city. However, his passion is mobilizing his neighbors.
If you provide for those around you, and they join you by providing for those around them, you have enlarged the circle and served your country.
Samir is a legal resident of Jerusalem, and he pays about $1,000 a year in city taxes to the Israeli administration. the exact same amount as Uri pays. Yet, Samir and his Palestinian neighbours receive almost no city services.
These are all letters from the municipality about the problems we have and all their replies.
The services that are provided in West Jerusalem are not the same as the ones in East Jerusalem.
Uri's neighbourhood has a modern sewage system. Samir's does not.
We are standing at a major junction in Kufa Akkad. As you can see, the road has been dug up to put a sewer pipe in it. The local people decided to build it themselves after 15 years of demanding that the city council put in a sewer pipeline. What made us pay for this project ourselves, despite the poor economic situation, was the health problems that resulted from the refusal of municipal authorities to respond to our requests.
Jerusalem, for me, is the most important city and the most important place in the world. On the one hand, it's a city that creates a lot of tension and a lot of conflicts. But on the other hand, it's the place where there is the possibility, in my opinion, of bringing peace to the world.
Jerusalem is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the first of the two Qiblas, toward which Muslims pray, and the third holiest mosque.
It's the city that I live in, work in, respect and appreciate. And it's a hard city.
Eleonora Berazaki is an Israeli who was Jerusalem's city engineer. She was born in Haifa and came to Jerusalem in the late 1970s to work as a planner for the Ministry of Housing. She lives in the Jewish quarter of the old city.
I must admit that at the beginning, Jerusalem got under my skin. It was an experience that only a few people could get. To build new neighborhoods the size of a medium city with the best architects. And it seemed like the most wonderful place in the world at that time.
Jerusalem is my city. The truth is that Jerusalem is part of every Palestinian soul. Jerusalem has been the spiritual, material, commercial and cultural center for Palestinians during all the years of our existence.
Dr. Nazmi Al-Jube is an advisor to the Palestinian Authority on Jerusalem. He co-directs an institute that preserves the Palestinian cultural heritage. His family originally came from Hebron.
After arriving in Jerusalem, my grandfather worked as a stonecutter on many projects, which included the columns inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. He spent an entire year working on the formation of a single stone that became the crown of one of the columns.
Azmi's father sold spices in the old city. His brother Bassem still runs the family store. Bassem used to make a good living before violence led to a huge drop in customers.
This is a family business. We're talking about 100 years of experiences. I am the third generation here. This represents the Palestinian culture and folklore, in addition to the presence of Arab Jerusalem. When a spice shop like this is open in the city, it makes me proud to be here, like my father and grandfather. I hope that this shop will remain here and peace will come, so it will help keep my family tradition. Business has dropped a lot, to the point where you can say that it's non-existent. 90 or 95% of my business has been destroyed. The best day is supposed to be Saturday, and we haven't sold 10 shekels worth since this morning.
There is no city in the world that encompasses all these characteristics and contradictions and all these challenges like the city of Jerusalem. I lived my whole life inside the old city. It was my playground, my school, my father's shop, my home, my friends. All my life was inside the walls. Its importance was not its cultural or architectural or historical aspects. All these aspects came much later in my life. In this school, I spent the first 6 years of my education. From this classroom, I used to gaze daily at the Haram al-Sharif. I used to sit in the classroom, and my eyes would not face the teacher. Most of the time, I looked at the Dome of the Rock and the buildings surrounding it. We used to learn about the history of the area through our play and our studying. Jerusalem's history became part of us, and we became part of Jerusalem's history.
The challenge in planning in Jerusalem is to make the city a place where people can reside, while blending the past with the present. We try to give people the feeling there is a future for this city, without disturbing its past.
Jerusalem has turned into a divided city, even without having walls.
Very few people cross the invisible borders. The invisible borders are the strongest. We know when we are not wanted. We know when we are in a place that threatens us.
I won't go to a place that is dangerous, like the eastern part of the city. I go where it's secure.
Jerusalem for me is the neighborhoods close by, within the city, close to the ancient part and not distant neighborhoods. I don't need Arab neighborhoods with large numbers of Palestinians who will be absorbed into Israel only because they live in East Jerusalem.
Zev Schiff is one of Israel's most respected journalists.
It is possible to find a solution for Jerusalem. There are things about which we have no choice other than to find a joint solution and to be creative in this topic.
A solution on Jerusalem would almost certainly need to be part of a comprehensive agreement that includes the other major issues that divide Palestinians and Israelis.
It is impossible to take the package apart. Maybe, for the purpose of explanation, we could take the problem of the refugees separately, or the problem of Jerusalem separately. We could relate separately to the issue of boundaries, settlements, occupation, security measures, but it all has to be seen as one integral package in the end. We can deal with it one slice at a time, but in the end, we need to have the whole cake.
For both Palestinians and Israelis, Jerusalem is at the core of the conflict. Both peoples consider the city essential to their national existence and insist it must be their capital.
Jerusalem is the place that in a way defines your cultural identity in belonging to this country.
Nabil Hatib is a distinguished Palestinian journalist and commentator.
When you talk about solving the Jerusalem issue, you find that it is almost impossible to divide it. Unless the 300,000 Jews now settled in East Jerusalem were to leave.
I accept the idea of Israeli sovereignty over the areas in which Jews live in East Jerusalem. And Palestinian sovereignty in the areas in which Muslims live.
You will not find a practical way out unless all of Jerusalem becomes a capital for the two states. Then you will not talk about dividing it, but rather how to administer it.
I prefer to see Jerusalem unified. That means one city in terms of running the place and taking care of the population, while we are also talking about two capitals.
I'm convinced that Jerusalem could be the capital of two states and an open and joint city. That would solve the problem of Israeli settlements in East Jerusalem and would also solve the problem of the city as a whole.
My feeling today is that if we want Jerusalem to be able to work as one system, we should take a time out and let each side rehabilitate itself.
We need to pass through an interim period, a period in which the two peoples can live independently from each other in order to re-identify themselves and to redefine their roles and relations.
I think that there should be two municipalities, an Al-Quds municipality for Palestinians and a Yerushalayim municipality for Israelis.
We have to rely on the principle of having two municipalities, in addition to a coordinating committee for municipal affairs that can deal with joint issues. Each party should take the interest of the other party into consideration. When borders are defined, for example, the Palestinian side should not be able to establish in a border area an industrial zone that would lead to environmental pollution on the Israeli side, and vice versa.
One of the problems in Jerusalem is that everything can turn into a symbol. A traffic light can become a symbol. A street becomes a symbol.
We can divide everything: electricity, water, sewage, streets, communications, transportation.
In a city that is totally divided, each side would have its own system of roads. But I believe that the city would want to leave itself the option of being open or closed at certain times.
The transportation network that has been built by the Israelis is definitely aimed at connecting together all the settlements that surround Jerusalem and East Jerusalem, so Israelis don't have to pass through Arab areas. Lately, there has been a concerted effort to open underground tunnels that pass under Arab areas and bridges that pass above them.
Actually, what we see today is an intersection of two cultures and an intersection of two nations. The Israeli traffic is traveling on the bridge and moving directly from the east to the south, while the Palestinian traffic stays on the road and comes from the north to the south. So what we see is a spatial solution for both large masses of traffic coming from north to south and from east to west or west to east. It is possible that part of the city's functions could be divided and other functions could be left united. I always give the example of sewage, since sewage has no national colors. No one would want to put a flag on sewage. Sewage is sewage, and everyone is happy to get rid of it. The sewage in Jerusalem, like any other place in the world, travels according to the laws of gravity.
We should establish a common Israeli-Palestinian committee, a committee to run the sewage and to plan it. This committee should not just decide the course of sewage, but also should protect the environment.
Those municipal services that are not symbolic and can be privatized would be the first steps in breaking the ice and establishing cooperation without friction and without stepping on the national existence of the other side.
While there are practical ways to deal with sewage, Jerusalem's old city is much more complicated. To both Israelis and Palestinians, the old city is a national treasure. Until 1967, it was part of Arab Jerusalem, and Israelis could not enter. Seizing the old city and its holy sites was one of the most joyous moments in Israeli history, and a dark day for Palestinians. Today, despite the security situation, the old city is mostly peaceful. Jews, Muslims and Christians all live in their own quarters. They share an interest in preserving the old city as a place that people from around the world want to visit. If Jerusalem were to become the capital of two states, little would have to change in the old city, except it could once again be full of tourists and pilgrims.
The old city is the place where we are conducting the ultimate experiment. We are trying to live together, based on a long history, and everyone living separately in their own quarter.
It could be enough to divide the old city along areas of sovereignty and also to have a shared administration. I believe that it's possible to implement this model very easily through the placement of inspection points at the outside gates of the old city. This would allow people to move easily without constraints and with complete freedom inside the old city.
These gates would mark the boundaries. They would say, up to here is mine, and from there is yours. But we could still cross from one side to the other.
In cases of crisis or tension between the two peoples, or whenever either the Palestinian or the Israeli side feels danger because of the presence of extremists or threats, it would be very easy to close this gate and reopen it at a later time when calmness returns.
The function of these gates would be ornamental on good days. On bad days, people would stand behind bars. I don't know which side would feel more imprisoned, those who are on this side of the bars or those on the other side.
In a corner of the old city, on only 15 acres of land, are the holy sites of the three religions that honor the prophet Abraham. There is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where Christians believe Jesus was crucified. The Wailing Wall, which Jews believe was part of their ancient temple. And the Dome of the Rock, which Muslims believe was the place from which Muhammad ascended to heaven.
All these religions can live here, maybe with the smaller dream. But there's a place for the Wailing Wall, the Holy Sepulchre, the Dome of the Rock. This is one of the beautiful things in the nature of the old city.
We should try not to bother each other and push the issue of sovereignty, as though we are sticking a finger into each other's eyes.
Less importance should be given to sovereignty over Jerusalem, and priority should be given to practical and religious considerations. Perhaps this would help find a reasonable solution that is acceptable to the various parties.
I think that there should be a special regime for the Holy Basin, and that each side should make sure that it protects the mutual rights of the other side. We need to understand the sensitivity of the issue, and this is where we also would need help from the Arab countries.
We Jews see the Temple Mount as the essential issue, and we understand that Muslims also find the place of highest sanctity.
Rabbi Eliyahu Bakshi Doron was chief Sephardic rabbi of Israel.
For the sake of peace, we should reach some kind of an agreement. It is not possible that a sacred place should reach this level of sanctity, with the sanctity of God, who is so merciful, that because of this place, there should be bloodshed from generation to generation.
Extremism, I believe, exists among all. It is like lighting a fire under our feet. The fire burns under our feet, and we have to put it out together.
Sheikh Talal Sidr was religious affairs advisor to the Palestinian Authority.
There are people who do everything to turn this political conflict into a religious conflict. And this is the most severe thing. Because there's nothing harsher and more difficult and more dangerous than a religious war.
I take responsibility for what I say. There is a solution for the city of Jerusalem that would be acceptable to over 80% of Israelis and Palestinians.
Let us say that I would just erase the word sovereignty and not talk about it. If we can say that this place does not belong either to me or to the Jewish people, or to the Muslims or the Christians, who does it belong to? It belongs to God. Let's neutralize this problem of sovereignty, and as a practical matter, ensure that every person can follow his religion in this place.
I don't think the problems of Jerusalem will be solved in one day. So, in the morning, I wake up in a beautiful place. But I do think if people want to, people can solve the problems. I don't think the problem is technological. I think Jerusalem's problems are a state of mind.
When peace comes to this land, God willing, it will be filled with all the colors and races of the globe. I look at my city in the role of bringing the world together after having divided it.
We must do everything to continue to build Jerusalem. And doing everything means also knowing how to treat the very complicated relationship between Jews and Arabs, between the religious population and the secular population. It is very complicated, but there is also great opportunity.
There is a great opportunity that Jerusalem will be, in fact, a city where everybody recognizes his place and his boundaries, and where everybody knows that Jerusalem is holy for everyone.
If we deal with Jerusalem through its history and civilization, I assure you, there won't be a city in the world that will be a city of peace like Jerusalem.
The shape of the future for Jerusalem might be to become the capital of two states, divided but united in the eyes of God and in practical ways, to the benefit of both Israelis and Palestinians. In such a city, life could be safe, even normal. But for both peoples, sharing the city would mean compromising their national dream.
The Israelis want the entire land, and we, the Palestinians, would like to have the entire land to ourselves. But we are fully convinced that this is not possible, that this land in its entirety will not be ours. And so should the Israelis be convinced that this land in its entirety will not be theirs. It is good to dream, it is nice to dream, but it isn't reality. Each of us has to give up part of our dream. For Israelis, it's the dream of holding on to the territories where Palestinians live. And for the Palestinians, it's the dream of having territories in which we currently live in our state. I don't deny the right of the Jews to live on this holy land. I reject the right of the Jews to be occupiers. I don't want occupation. I don't deny their rights. We do not hate Jews as human beings. We hate the Jewish occupation.
After 50 years of war that came to nothing, that hurt everyone, no less the Muslims than the Jewish people, we have to coexist. We have to have two countries living side by side after reaching a peace agreement. In order for us to do that, we have to separate.
I recognize the state of Israel, and I don't wish to destroy the Israeli state. I have no interest in destroying the Israeli state. I believe that my interest lies in recognizing the Israeli state, but in borders that are acceptable to me.
Israelis and Palestinians have been locked in conflict for more than 50 years. Too many people have died. Too many lives have been shattered. Can the future be different from the past? Is peace possible? Can two peoples who have fought each other for so long live next to each other without violence? This film explores how the core issues might be resolved. Jerusalem, security, Palestinian refugees, settlements and borders. The shape of the future.
This place was full of fig trees, grapevines, olive trees. Under this tree, we used to tie our camels, here and here. And in that place, we used to keep our sheep, our cows, our horses. Today, there's nothing left, just empty fields and stones. You can't imagine my life. Life today is miserable. Even if the sky rained gold, I would not be happy. After leaving our homeland, being away from it, not able to see each other, we are not happy. Never. Only returning to my home would make me happy.
83-year-old Jamal Haleli is a Palestinian refugee. When he was born, Palestine was under British control. In 1948, Jews and Arabs fought a bitter war over this land. The Jews won and established the State of Israel. Every year they celebrate their victory in what they call the War of Independence. The Arabs lost. They mourn over the same events which they call the Nakba, the catastrophe. After 1948, the village where Jamal was born, like hundreds of other Palestinian villages, was destroyed.
I know why he wants to return. He was born here.
Today, where Jamal's village once stood, there is an Israeli center for treating drug and alcohol addiction. Yitzhak Sulman is the manager of that center.
I returned to Czechoslovakia for the first time to see the place where I was born. Though I didn't grow up there, I was only 2 years old when I moved to Israel. When I visited my birthplace, I felt that I belonged. I felt that I'd been there before, and that this place was in some way part of me. So I say this issue of the Palestinian right of return is not so simple. I have no doubt that if millions of Palestinians were to return to Israel, we would no longer be a Jewish state. Simply speaking, it wouldn't work. There isn't enough room.
Today, there are several million Palestinian refugees in camps in the West Bank, Gaza, Jordan, Lebanon and Syria. Elderly people like Jamal who fled in 1948 and their descendants.
They drove out our grandparents from the land now called Israel. It meant the partition of the country, partition of society, separation of families, killing of dreams, cutting off Palestinians from their homes and their history.
Nabil Hatib is a distinguished Palestinian journalist and commentator.
The problem of the refugees is a very difficult one, since it is a wound which, if we don't relate to, it is doubtful we will ever reach true reconciliation.
Zev Schiff is one of Israel's most respected journalists.
Hello?
Good evening, my brother. How are you, brother? I hope you are well.
How are you?
May God protect you.
May God protect you.
How are the children?
They're all around me. Jamal and Saleh and the family. They are all around me here, and praise God, they all ask about you.
Mohammed Haleli is a Palestinian refugee. He has lived for 50 years in the Shatila refugee camp near Beirut, Lebanon. His sister Hafisa never left the village where they were born, which is located near Haifa in the north of Israel.
How is it going there? Reassure me about your news, about your life.
It's a life of hardships and suffering for someone who is living far from his village and his nation. What do you expect other than a trying life?
The first time I saw a refugee camp, I remember that I was in shock.
Israela Oron was a brigadier general in the Israeli army and is the former deputy director of Israel's National Security Council. She was in charge of refugee issues.
I was shaken by the density and the poverty. I remember the sewage flowing in the street. I remember little children without shoes. I came into a room that belonged to a family. I remember the room was completely empty, except for some mattresses.
If you talk to a refugee in any of the camps, you will find him living in terrible conditions and facing difficult questions from his son, such as, why am I here, father? Why am I living in these conditions? The father tries to console himself and his son and says, we used to have a history, my son. We used to have an orchard and fields.
We were raised to believe that the refugees are not our problem.
The problem of the refugees was created as a result of the war. It is the result of a tragic event of two nations, two peoples, who fought each other with the help of the other Arab countries.
Our narrative is, we wanted to live in peace. We accepted the UN's plan to divide the land. The Arabs did not accept it. The Arabs decided that they would invade and drive out the Jews. So, in some way, most Israelis don't feel they have committed a sin in this matter.
When the Israeli army came here, they came from that hill, and they started shooting machine guns. People ran away. We went to those hills and stayed there.
The young men left out of fear and horror. If it hadn't been for the fear and horror, no one would have left. They would have all stayed.
We can't claim zero responsibility for this matter. Certainly we're not responsible for perpetuating the refugees' situation, but there clearly was a responsibility. One of the things that we can't really appreciate as Israelis is just how important it is for the Palestinians that we declare that we bear a responsibility for their suffering. Israel must absolutely acknowledge the suffering that was endured by the refugees because of what happened in 1948.
I brought this key from the old village with me. Now I want to give it to my son. I want him to keep it, to keep his homeland, our homes, our land. Keep this key. Don't discard it. Don't forsake anything. We will return to our homes, to our village.
Maher, this is the key to your grandfather's house in Al-Tiri.
Tiria Dandan.
Keep it, just like I'm going to keep it.
I cannot change or alter the feelings of someone who has been, in my opinion, deliberately misled for 50 years by the Arab community, which has been strengthening the dream that they will be able to go back to places where we Israelis now live.
Tzipi Livni was Israel's Minister of Immigration Absorption. She belongs to the Likud party of Prime Minister Ariel Sharon.
The bargain that I propose to the Palestinian people is very straightforward. Namely, that we Israelis would agree to establishment of a Palestinian state in return for the Palestinians giving up the right of return.
We will remain steadfast year after year until our children or even our grandchildren return to their homeland.
The refugees seek to go back to that bright past through the right of return. At least this is their feeling. It may be their fantasy, but this is how they honestly think.
We must be clear and not talk about fantasy. Therefore, the return of thousands or millions of refugees to Israel will not be a solution.
Hisham Abdel Razik is both the refugee and the Palestinian Minister of Prisoner Affairs. He spent 21 years in Israeli prisons.
I read the Torah more than 3 times. It was part of my desire for knowledge as a Palestinian. My land is occupied, and it is my duty to work to free my land. The Israelis, for their part, are protecting their country and their existence to the best of their beliefs.
We cannot turn back history. The wheel of history does not go in reverse.
Therefore, we must build a new future. If we want to look toward the past and history, then we will remain stuck in the turbulence in which we have lived for over 55 years.
All we can do is to try to reach a settlement which will allow us to have a better future.
Can Palestinians ignore their history and their rights for the sake of the future? Because reality now demands different standards of thinking. The reality of the existence of 2 states. The reality of the existence of 2 peoples. The reality of millions of Palestinians and Israelis who are fighting over one piece of land.
While most refugees believe that the right of return is a basic moral right, in reality, they are ready to accept practical solutions that would not threaten the present demographic composition of Israel.
Dr. Halil Shikaki, himself a Palestinian refugee, is a highly respected polling expert who surveyed 4,500 refugees on where they would choose to live if and when there is a peace agreement.
The polls in Palestine, Jordan and Lebanon show that only 10% of refugees want to return to Israel.
My family, my brothers and sister are still in the village. They didn't leave. I desperately want to see them, and they want to see me.
This is Mohammed. This is his son, and that's me in the middle when they were here on a visit. I was photographed with him and his son.
In 1978, Israel used to give permits to refugees to visit their families inside Israel. And I went there and stayed with my family for a month. They were so happy when we came. My eyes were blind from crying, and also their eyes were blind from crying.
What were my feelings? I thought I was going to die when I saw them. Let my brother return and I will give him a place to stay.
I can accept the concept of family reunification in reasonable numbers. It should be decided according to humanitarian needs, and Israel has to be open to this.
Israel must accept a limited number of people, meaning Israel cannot say absolutely not.
I will live under Israeli authority just like my sister and brothers are doing.
At the end of the day, refugee problems are solved when people are given real choices about their future that offer them different futures for their children, that offer them combinations of benefits, and it's presented to them in a way that doesn't denigrate their dignity.
Michael Malloy was Canadian ambassador to the Middle East peace process.
It's not hard for me to imagine countries like the United States, Canada, Australia, not to mention many of the European countries who tend to have generous asylum policies, not to mention some of the Arab countries, providing options for people.
The poll in Jordan found that 1/3 of refugees living in Jordan have the desire to stay in Jordan as Jordanian citizens.
I was born in the Schneller refugee camp. I have 23 sisters and brothers.
Hatem Shaheen is a Palestinian who owns a barber shop in Amman, Jordan.
I work on average 14 hours a day. I'm happy in Jordan. Personally, I will stay in Jordan. I have my work and my house here. It will be difficult to start anew in a place where I've never lived.
Unlike Hatem, most Palestinians, if given the choice, would like to live in Palestine.
The polls show that the overwhelming majority of Palestinians want to live in a Palestinian state.
I would choose to reside in the Palestinian state because I believe that there I would find my identity and my place and satisfy the desire of my people to build their future.
The shape of the Palestinian future would seem to rest with the next generation, with young people like Ramzi Abu Radwan, who is known throughout Palestine as the poster child of the First Intifada.
I was 8 years old. I was walking home from school with my friend. Suddenly my friend fell to the ground. I saw blood coming out of his head. I looked in the distance and I saw many Israeli soldiers. I was in shock. I picked up some stones and started running towards the soldiers. I got hit 3 times by bullets. From that time on, I kept throwing stones, almost every day. Sometimes my grandfather used to tie me down with ropes to stop me from going out of the house. I was 17 years old when I first started with music. I knew a Palestinian teacher who showed me various instruments. I chose the viola.
We want to live in a Palestinian state within the boundaries of June the 4th, 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital, and to live as a peaceful state alongside Israel.
The goal is the establishment of two states, Palestine and Israel, that live next to each other in peace and security.
I want to have a peaceful life here, and in order to have a Jewish state, I am willing to forfeit some part of the land.
The solution and the final settlement are based on the assumption that Palestine is the Palestinian state and Israel is the Jewish state. Palestinians all around the world have the right of return to Palestine, to the state of Palestine. This is a legitimate right that nobody can take away from us.
This is a question that each country must deal with separately. We have no right to intervene in their right to return to their homeland.
Naturally, if both parties reach a final agreement, this will mean an end to future demands.
We would like to reach a place regarding the refugee question where the refugees would have no remaining claims.
I would say that we're talking about billions of dollars over an extended period. This problem is not going to be wrapped up very rapidly. You're probably looking at a commitment that could go on for something like 15 to 20 years. So you have to think about the infrastructure, you have to think about assisting families upgrading their housing, you have to think about assisting the state with schools and water and sewage and those sorts of things.
The refugees should live with a small dream, but nobody can remove the grand dream from their souls. But they must live with a small dream, because this is the possible dream, and the one that would allow for the possibility of life and living in peace for this generation and for future generations.
The music may have helped me to come out, not completely, to express myself and do many things like performing in concerts around the world, and to communicate who I am and that I come from a refugee camp and that we Palestinians are like all other kids in the world, except we have limited means to do things.
الامكانيات اللي بنعيشها يعني مش محدد يعني مفيش عندنا امكانيات انه نقدر نعمل اشي. حابب انه ان شاء الله يعني
I would like, God willing, to work on a project that will bring music to a large number of children in refugee camps in the West Bank and Gaza. When children have hope, they will think more about living. If there is no hope, children will pick up stones and throw them.
I don't see the process as centering on who is more just or who has been hurt more. I think what is really important is to teach the next generation. And I hope it happens among the Palestinians as well, to teach them how we can live together.
The Palestinian people have a great passion for life. As the poet Mahmoud Darwish said, we love life when we find the way.
Only a few kilometers from the refugee camp where Ramsey lives is located the settlement of Bet El, which is built on land Israel seized from Jordan in 1967. It is one of several hundred Jewish settlements and outposts on the West Bank and in Gaza.
We moved to Bet El 21 years ago. We returned to the land, taking it from whomever lived here for the past 100 years. I am here because I have to be here, because it says so in the Bible, because I have no other choice, and because history leads me to return to my land. For this, I could, God forbid, sacrifice my children's lives.
Emunah and Benny Elon live in Bet El. Benny is a rabbi and a former Israeli cabinet minister who leads a right-wing party. Emunah is a writer and a housewife.
This is our home. This is our land. We have returned to this land exactly as promised in the Bible. We never abandoned this land. We were exiled from it.
Ari Elon is Benny's brother. He is a teacher and scholar of ancient Jewish texts.
There is a significant connection between being Jewish and the Old Testament, but this doesn't give me any right to own the land, and surely it doesn't give me any right to drive away another people, the Palestinians.
This is not a theological, theoretical issue. It is a debate over life. I live here, and I have a brother who wants to uproot me from my home.
I think that oppressing another people and withholding their rights in order to maintain a larger piece of land is a crime.
This left-wing political stupidity causes us to feel weak, not to be connected to the Bible, not to be connected to tradition, not to be connected to the land.
I am not glad to divide my country, but I'm happy to behave as a grown person, knowing that one of the clear symptoms of growing up is to realize that not everything can be mine.
I am a sheriff with a tank and a rifle who defends the right of the people of Israel to return to the land of Israel. I don't have to be an underdog to be right.
Just down the hill from Benny's house in Bet El is a Palestinian village where Aisha and Said Farah live.
They say it's their land. It's not. They've stolen the land. They expand as they wish, and no one stops them.
I have 2 married daughters. I swear to God it's been 6 years since I last visited them. The roads are closed. We can't pass. I planted these olive trees. They uprooted 2 of my olive trees.
We won't allow them to hide among those trees. What's preferable, to save human life or to leave trees? As a sovereign power, if for reasons of security I need to destroy even hundreds of olive trees, then I will do so. And not only olive trees, without pity.
Olive trees have been nurtured sometimes for hundreds of years. They symbolize for Palestinian families their connection to the land. To cut down olive trees is a catastrophe. I experience many such incidents.
Dov Sadaka is a retired Israeli brigadier general. He headed Israel's civil administration for the West Bank.
It can cause severe hatred to wake up every morning and to have to pass through roadblocks or barricades in order to reach school, or to be cut off from essential health care, or to be denied access to basic education.
יכול לגרום לשנאה מאוד גדולה.
The Palestinian peasant finds himself losing his land bit by bit to the Israeli settler, and he feels helpless if he thinks about resisting, since the settler is armed and is a citizen of the Jewish state that is occupying the land.
It turned into an occupation the moment we meddled in Palestinian lives, the moment we settled among them, the moment we did not allow them to control themselves. Instead, we ruled over them with force. This is a painful evil. It is a cancer.
Weakness and submission invite further terrorism and more murder.
I say hatred increases terror. Hatred creates a lack of security for the State of Israel.
I'm a settler. I am a pioneer. I'm on a mission for my people.
Othniel Schneller is the former head of the Yesha Council, the body that represents Israeli settlers on the West Bank and in Gaza.
We came to this place called Malay Mikmash 23 years ago. The government of Israel sent us here. That was the most legitimate thing in the world.
If he does not realize that he has to leave the house he built, even if by force, there won't be peace.
The dismantlement of settlements will not decrease the security of the State of Israel. I think that the State of Israel will be more secure if there is a Palestinian state. Without the continuous threat of terror, a reform state with a reformed administration, with an organized police and the rule of law.
Palestinians will not abandon their aspirations and dreams for a Palestinian state without Israeli occupation.
I believe that peace is very important, so that future generations can live here in a normal state. While war with the Palestinians could continue for another 50 or 100 years, or as long as is necessary, I very much don't want that to happen. Under certain circumstances, I would agree, for the sake of peace, to give up parts of my land.
There can be a choice that forms a compromise for us and for the Israelis.
We have two options. Do we want to live with them in a bi-national society where there is no more Jewish state, but there is a bi-national state? Or, after 2,000 years of exile, do we want to live in a Jewish state?
I want to combine the two values of democracy and living in a Jewish state. Therefore, I would be prepared to enter into a process which would mean separating.
The Israeli government is currently building a separation fence that it contends is essential to preventing terrorism. Palestinians call it the apartheid wall.
I believe in the fence, but the fence should be the same fence which will be the border between the two nations. That's why part of the fence which is being built today is not in the right place.
The fence should, in large part, be built along the 1967 border. Not everywhere. It's not possible everywhere.
Today, however, the fence or wall cuts deep into the West Bank, and much of it is being built on land Israel occupied in 1967. The International Court of Justice has ruled this is illegal, and Israel's High Court has decreed that the route should be changed to take into account Palestinian rights.
I don't find this to be a suitable condition for establishing a state. It is apartheid to isolate the Palestinian population in this way. It will not constitute a state, even if it is called a state.
When I say a Palestinian state, I mean a state. A state can't be made up of cantons. A state can't be in parts, and so there can be no doubt that it has to be territorially contiguous.
There will be no escape from removing settlements in certain areas, so that the Palestinian state will be able to exist, and so that there will be continuity in their territory.
Settlements located within a continuum of the Arab population and land will belong to the Palestinian state. Settlers will have to relocate. It will be terrible.
A well-organized minority of Israelis strongly opposes evacuating any settlements.
We came to march, to start the struggle, to fight, whatever we have to do, whether it means marching across the entire country or if it means standing at intersections, speaking to people.
We won't let them pass. We'll block the roads. If there's a need for force, we'll use force. We won't move from our houses because we believe that there's no difference between this piece of land and any other piece of land in this country.
If the Israeli government orders the evacuation of settlements, many Israelis fear civil violence.
A war between brothers is a concept that terrifies the residents of this land, and rightfully so.
We would fight using democratic means, in any legal way possible. Demonstrations, opposition, passive disobedience, not violence. Not violence. If the government should be so stupid and so bereft of roots as to do such a thing, then so be it. We're not going to kill our brothers.
I don't believe that it will reach bloodshed or civil war. If the state reaches an agreement with the national majority and with the minority, the settlers will have to accept it. If force is necessary, then force will be used.
If it were to be decided that Malay Mikmash won't be here, then to my great sorrow and in mourning and with a sense of destruction, I would stand at the front of the group that declares that the unity of the Israeli people is more important than the unity of the land.
In addition to being a settler, Othniel is also an officer in the Israeli Army Reserve. His unit could well be called on to carry out evacuations.
I told my commanders that if I am forced to do so, I will take a knife, a pocket knife, and I will cut my collar, as any mourner. I will say the blessing, "Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe. Blessed is the true judge." And then I will say to all, through my mourning and through my tears, "The law of the land is the law."
In 1982, Israel and Egypt signed the Camp David peace agreement, and Israel agreed to end its occupation of the Sinai Peninsula, which it had seized from Egypt during the Six-Day War. As a result, 7,000 Israeli settlers were evacuated from their homes.
There were demonstrations, wild behavior then, but there was a strong minister. It was Sharon who did the evacuation, and he did it with a strong hand. He carried out decisions quickly and without compromise. I was then the Director General of the Ministry of Finance, and whatever the politicians decided, we had to follow through. We held the purse, and we had to make sure that the settlers would evacuate quietly and more or less willingly.
It's natural that people would oppose evacuating their homes, but in the end we accepted the law. We got into our cars and everyone left.
Nakum Shafa and Zohar Sadeh were among the 7,000 Israelis forced to leave Sinai and resettle in Israel as part of the peace agreement with Egypt.
We had been in Sinai for 11 years. The decision was very difficult, especially since we had established a wonderful settlement there.
Someone has to sit and listen to people like me and to other people who experienced the evacuation.
It is definitely important to involve the people who have to go through the process. It's a difficult process.
If they have to transfer settlements, they should try to move a settlement with its population in a cohesive way to a place that resembles as much as possible the place they come from. When you take a person from a desert with stones, you should bring him to a new desert with stones.
There is no other way but to compensate people who are losing their property and who are moving to another place.
My assessment is it will cost about $500,000 per family. This is the lowest estimate I would use. To evacuate 10,000 families, it is reasonable to assume that it will cost the Treasury $5 billion.
Today, after the fact, I've already been here for 21 years. The farm is glorious. I love it. I'm proud of it.
I say that with evacuation there is a crisis, but it is possible to get over it. It's not something that you can't get through. My wounds have healed. I say there is life after evacuation.
If the shape of the future for Israeli settlers includes evacuation, they're likely to be offered land inside Israel, in lightly populated areas such as the Negev region. Shibi Elon, who is Benny and Emuna's son and Ari's nephew, is already pioneering a new community in the Negev.
It's awesome. There are no words to describe the feeling of founding a community, a settlement truly from nothing. It's really satisfying, generally speaking, the Negev, the desert, and also this settlement and this spirit have deep roots. You really find yourself often facing yourself facing basic existence, facing God, facing family, and asking the questions and being forced to deal with those things which are also difficult.
There was and there remains a commandment to settle the land of Israel, the Negev, Judea, Samaria, the Galilee. I have never felt more love for any area than the greater land of Israel.
It would be beneficial if all the energy that Benny and the founders of Beth-El used to build their settlement could be invested somewhere else.
We are a family with different views, and all the people of Israel are one family with different opinions.
I think it's very natural for brothers to have different opinions.
One needs to remember that while Ari and I have opposite opinions in political areas, we are brothers, and we love each other. And it wouldn't enter my mind that I would cause him any harm. It is the same with the state of Israel.
We all agree that the land is ours, and since it is ours, we have to petition it. And that's what I want to hear from Benny. He doesn't have another choice. Someday he will say it. Deep inside, he knows it.
I think this can be defined as a disagreement for the sake of heaven, which actually leads to a deeper and better examination of situations and the best solution possible.
And for Israelis and Palestinians to find the best possible solution, both sides would have to settle for less than their maximum demands.
A political solution would deny both the Israeli grand dream and the Palestinian grand dream. It would require an agreement between the two sides to live in peace and to end the state of war and conflict.
We cannot live on our swords forever, to kill and be killed.
Each side was brought up on dreams. Both parties should perhaps reach a truce with dreams, which is hard to do on the human level.
It is said of us Israelis that we're pessimistic, that we look at the glass being half full, and that we are fearful and always prepare for the worst. Well, first of all, historically speaking, we have good reasons for acting this way. Still, if you're not looking forward and willing to take a few risks, you won't get anywhere.
It's a difficult transformation from being prisoners of pain and suffering in the past to looking toward the future.
I think that a Palestinian state should be for the Palestinians what Israel was for me and for my parents when we came here. The realization of their dreams, to be independent, to make decisions regarding their fate.